Good morning, Scott. Thank you. Pleasure to be here today. First, lest I forget, let me extend my thanks to Netlogistics, certainly Walt, Scott, Glenn, Blue Yonder as well, for the opportunity to talk today, but even more so for what is now, I'm going to say, probably for the first time, a successful launch over the last 90 days with about 25 clients and 2 new buildings. So I wanted to get that out of the way first. Look, I thought I would start a little bit with that. Yeah. I thought I would start a little bit about the impetus for this presentation. This is not a canned speech. I don't have this deck that I go. It's not my material. If you're interested in what we do for a living, go look at our website. But this is, I thought I would do something a little different. These are 6 or 7 slides I put together as a result of answering a question from my sponsor, who is an real estate investment company, who wanted to enter the temperature-controlled supply chain space. There's a lot of people that have wanted to do that. I understand we might have some competitors in here as well, and some others have spoken at this conference. There's a half a dozen that have been interested in investing in the space, and there is a lot of new capacity entering the cold chain space, tremendous amounts. In our world, that's 500,000 pallet positions or so. But the interesting thing is, these aren't laptops or cars or anything like that. This is food. Food is among the most stable products through a supply chain you can find, okay? So you would think, right? So my sponsors asked me a really good question. Our company's 30 months old only, but we're already the 12th largest in the country, or at least by capacity, I should say. And they said, well, why is it that there's so much growth and investment in an industry that is flat as anyone I can see? Any one of you can go to a USDA website and see that from a consumption standpoint, we eat the same amount of food in real terms. I mean, there's population growth, but that's marginal. So why so much more need and investment in the industry? And I'm like, well, I'm not really sure, but I know I got to get out of my comfort zone of being a supply chain technologist and try to understand the underlying trends of what's causing a ton more space needs, people needs, complexity needs in what should be the most stable sector of all products. Okay. I'm hoping this discussion is a little interactive. Like I said, it's not just a story that we've had or canned. I just put together some slides to talk about it. I do better if someone just raises their hand or has any questions. That's all fine with me. But let me start with a little quiz, because one of the things that I found is the world is changing. I didn't know you were going to kick off with an age speech, or I might not have even been here. But as long as I can remember, I heard, oh my gosh, you should get in this industry. This was in 1989 when I was in logistics school somewhere, and they said it's changing so fast. And I think I've never heard it not say that. So I didn't want to go up here and say the world is changing, but there are some changes that are happening that are precedent setting. And the first one has to do with, well, that's fine. We can talk about complexity and shorter life cycles and electronic communication and all those kind of things. But what's interesting to me is the roles that people play in the supply chain today are different than yesterday. Very. I mean, we all remember, I don't know how many of you, maybe know the MIT beer game, or you kind of, if you're logisticians, you kind of learn about tier 1, tier 2, manufacturing, post-manufacturing buffer, in-market, fulfillment, whatever that traditional supply chain looks like, right? But the roles that people play in there are really different. So let's take a look at this. I just would love to do this if I could. Who is this company? No Googles, please. Oh, sorry, except for Paula. Paula, you're Google. You can stay, but no Googling. Come on, take a guess. This is $86 billion in revenue, okay? I mean, if you start thinking about it, these are names you know, right? Because an $86 billion company is 634 stores, so basically every one of you has one of these stores. Almost, nearly half of you have their product in their house. And so what brand could this be with that much penetration? It's just really fun. It's Kirkland. And the irony here is that's not a brand. That's a retailer. And forever, you would have done that slot and you said, well, that's a retailer. That's not a retailer, guys. That's a brand, and already one of the largest brands in the country, and it's disguised as a retailer. Let's try it again. $240 billion market cap. Started with humble roots, nutrition, baby formula, I think it was. But now, a quarter of their revenue comes from online purchases, and they have stores all over as well, US, China, global. Any idea what manufacturer that might be, but selling D2C? That's Nestle. So you think of these pods. So I thought it was a fun tee up. I hope some of this connects in the next couple of slides, but the point is what used to be a manufacturer today isn't necessarily a manufacturer. What used to be a retailer isn't necessarily a retailer. What is online, offline, I don't even know what those words mean anymore. You go to a bricks and mortar store and you replenish it online. So the first thing I found is the roles that people play are radically different. So you combine that with three other macro trends that we think are happening, and I'll speed up here a little bit. It was a big tee up. Really threefold. And I know a lot of us feel this in your own homes today, but certainly we're buying differently. So you buy online versus on store, hybrid shopping, buy online, replenish, subscriptions. From a real estate perspective, we're in the temperature controlled space. From a logistics perspective, it's very, very similar to dry, but from an infrastructure standpoint, not so much. These buildings cost about 4 times what a dry building costs, and in today's world, any one of them is in excess of $100 million, okay? Any decent sized one. So the real estate demographics are shifting. In our industry, the buildings are an average of 40 years old, okay? And these are highly complex buildings that generate lots of cold, so a 40-year-old building inherently, irrespective of its inability to meet today's logistics demands, are inefficient, okay? And then from a logistics standpoint, I think we all know this as logisticians, many, many new entrants of manufacturers, many, many new options, SKU proliferation, local to local instead of big CPGs. All of that means more products, increased shipments, but smaller sizes. So I was trying to take all those and start with the fact that the guy who used to make product now is a seller. I mean, Mondelez has never sold an Oreo to an individual in their life, okay? But they're trying to figure it out. So, and put all this together, I think somewhere in there is the answer. I don't know exactly what it is, but the world's changing. I see that. The space that we need to operate our business is doing this, and the amount of output and consumption that goes into your mouth is flat. And I think the answer on why there's such a difference, and that manifested itself in our industry into 500,000 pallet positions, which is material, okay? That's a $4 or $5 billion of investment to build new buildings. So why? Well, here's the segments are blurring. I already mentioned that. I don't want to go through these. You got 365 and as one of the biggest values as well. If you want some more empirical evidence, here is CPG's quest to understand their consumers. Today, and I'm not a marketer. I'm a supply chain guy, I'm telling you, and a technologist, or at least a wannabe technologist. But I had to understand what was driving all these big changes in our business. And I think these guys and gals at CPGs, big, fast-moving consumer good companies, you know, about 30 companies make about half the food in this country, if you're not familiar with that, and declining to local artisan brands. These guys see that. By the way, none of these are our clients. I'm speaking with no internal information. This is my swag of what's happening in the world. I need to say that to keep myself clean. But these guys right here have all bought these guys. There's a ton more of them. Maybe I shouldn't have done this one now because this is a little local and just, I guess, they announced they were splitting up here this last month or something. All of these guys are trying to understand first-person data. They're trying to figure out who they're selling to, because today they build all their marketing and forecasts and all that based on syndicated data. Now they want to figure out that I want to send this to Walt Cabe on Main Street in Dallas, you know? Probably realistically too, by the way, Walt, wherever you are. So let me try to drill it down. What does that mean a little bit? So now I'm trying to apply that to the market. Our sector, I happen to work in an industry where more than half the capacity is owned by 2 providers. And I'm not going to go through details. And again, I just want to point this management's assessment, which is just me opining, just to be clear. But I tried to map out our industry. And I figured out it was pretty bifurcated, okay? You've got these guys chasing scale, okay? You certainly scale. And I even put some lines to get those 2 gorillas over there on the right. The 2 of them own, again, I don't know, it's something like 1,000 boxes in the US now, something very, very large. But then you have these other people chasing scale, putting in big systems to try to drive down per unit pricing. But at the same time, you had those CPGs going, wait a minute, I'm trying to figure out how to sell an Oreo to somebody. I need you to do something called a each. In this room, I think, knows what an each. Should I not use terminology like that? But an individual unit, okay? Well, that's obvious. This is the cold sector. I'm telling you, our industry didn't know what an each was a decade ago. If you wanted to take an each out of a box, you literally took it out of cold storage and you said, you got to go hire somebody called a co-manufacturer to do something like that. We don't open a case here. That's taboo. So these smaller, nimble guys said, well, that looks like a white spot to me. And oh, by the way, the guys over here, there's something called a REIT, a real estate investment trust. That's really what they are. And so they really create value by storage, not handling. These guys are in it for handling margin, including us. So the problem is, this is a relatively low margin business, and you kind of get into the middle of everybody else, and they don't really have infrastructure. Most of these guys, rent rooms and try to do logistics activities. These guys go get big buckets of capital, private equity, $100 million at a time, and build buildings. To me, and for sure what we call cold chain Unchained, just to give a little plug for ourselves, but not uniquely ourselves, we certainly got some competitors, are trying to split that difference. So we've invested something like $250 million into a couple of buildings that will hold big pallet positions for bulk storage, with the concept of, I don't know where it's going and I don't care, but I can pull an each, I can pull a case, I can pull a pallet, I can pull a layer, I can pull 100 eaches and kit it, I can do a decorate to order, package to order, label to order, I can do all those kind of things that we know as good logisticians, but sound foreign to the cold storage industry. But that's not good enough. I also have to be able to provide very big, high capital invested bulk storage. So to us, what we call Omni-Channel Unchained, and almost the punchline here, is trying to figure out how to service the Coca-Colas, the Mondelez, the Unilevers, as they say, I want to sell Oreos and need you to do retail replenishment or order online. So our tech stack has been focused on that. How am I doing? There's 12 left. Oh, not bad. Okay, so a little bit deeper, I think it's 3 things that need to change, that are absolutely changing quickly. The concepts of geography, facility, and service capabilities and technology, I think they're the 3 I saw, to tie it back to 1989 when I was in college. The difference is what's within there. So I'm going to pull one of those apart. This is a little bit unique to cold, I believe. But traditionally, cold storage buildings where there is some type of post-manufacturing, post-harvest buffer. So generally, these buildings are sitting next to, and if you look at the US, this is where sources come from. This is a lot of farming, salmon, this is beef world. The Southeast is always poultry land, if you're not familiar. And people would pop up cold boxes because they would process these things and need to store it before they moved it downstream. That's not new for anybody, right? But in cold, there is a shift from being from production down to consumption. There's a big move of all these buildings, which also has an inference of multi-client for the first time. So instead of being the Tyson big box next to the processing center, how do you move that very quickly into market and put it from the consumption side? The blue dots, by the way, for it's a shameless plug, are where my facilities are. So there's certainly a shift to the consumption side, but there's this other thing happening. You're getting food at your house a lot more than used to. Now, a lot of the cold storage guys would tell you it's largely irrelevant. It's a very small piece of the industry. It's a tiny piece of the industry. Well, it's less small than it was a few years ago, actually, and now it's actually just small. It's actually kind of like average for next year. I mean, the key is these are one of those things that's sneaking up on you, right? It was 100 bips of the market, 1% of the market. It's like 4 or 5 now, but it's graining 1 a year. That's huge. That's a huge shift in our business. So what that's doing is it's sending all this stuff in parcel. Well, what happens when you move to parcel? What used to be the transportation side expands because you have a much broader area to serve. So it used to be I needed to be here to serve Publix. Oh gosh, I'm not in Publix. Wegmans. Who's the grocer here? Thank you. You can go bigger because that stuff's going to go into a parcel network anyway. So location is everything. Well, in logistics, location is everything, but in cold especially because the transportation is about 3 times the warehousing for cold. So we see this big shift of widening what a draw area is, okay? So there's a couple other pieces there I think it missed, but I'm just going to skip it. No, I'm not. Close enough. And then you have intra-facility changes. And again, I looked at this, and I think there's a lot of very, very bright technologists and supply chain people in here. So some of this looks like table stakes to you. But really, this is new for the cold chain industry, okay? We have backup power. Now, backup power is not that, again, unique in warehousing. It is in cold storage. These things take a beast amount of power. So when you put one of these out there, you don't need 1, you need 6. That kind of thing, you know? And then, we got to put dry ice in our packages that go parcel. So we buy dry ice, then we put it in. Well, we started thinking about simultaneous manufacturing, vertical integration. We now produce dry ice on site. Well, what does that do? Well, that allows you to get it on site for sure, but dry ice melts, or more technically sublimates. And so being able to produce it on demand, and not only that, it's sold in 5 or 10 pound blocks. But if you make it, if you need 7, you make 7. So all these kinds of things, extra wide docks, you walk into one of our facilities, the dock is 90 feet wide. What do you do with one of those? What a waste. Nope. That is where all the sortation, dedicated rooms for value-added services. It's funny, I've been in the cold storage industry for a long time. We've been talking about efficiency and delaboring and all these kinds of things. And you say automation to a cold guy, it means one thing. Anyone got it? Not forklift. Thank you, though. ASRS. ASRS. When we say automation, it's the last thing in our mind. We're talking about kitting robots. We're talking about convey from over here to over there. It's all about high-touch stuff. So that, to us, is really a big change. Temperature controls. We've chopped our buildings up. These are big buildings. We're doing 600,000 square feet in East Hanover right now. We launched 2 buildings, one in Texas, one in Florida, each 400,000 square feet. All of them are broken into at least 6 rooms that we can control from -20 up to, mid coolers. So it's not supposed to be a commercial for real cold, although if you know anybody that needs cold storage, no. It's not supposed to be a commercial, but the concept is these are revolutionary changes for cold chain. Okay, these are all those changes I spoke about, retailers becoming brands and all this. At the end of the day, it looks to me like you need to be able to accomplish anything. So you don't start thinking about, well, how many SKUs do you have and you have? What does it matter? You're going to have 100 clients in here, so they're going to have to handle a many-to-many relationship. So here's how we look at that from a technology perspective. For us, there's a couple table stake kind of things. It's expected in supply chain today that how you talk to people systemically, in the world of 3PLs, you just got to be very chameleon-like. You got to be able to talk to anybody, anyhow, in the way that they want to communicate with you. In cold storage, it has historically not been very good about passing traditional EDI and that kind of stuff. So they actually have a chance to skip that whole generation with real live communication in today's world. So this is our footprint for that. It's powered by Blue Yonder. Netlogistik has been involved in helping us put all this together. But at the end of the day, I'm really looking forward to Paula's presentation because we have these things called business rule layers, event management layers, visualization layers. That's very difficult. But it's all about using some type of intelligence to generate information when you're not yet asking. The old world was, pipeline, supply chain visibility, how can I query at any point? But this is about proactively pushing information to all those constituents. So now you have a Unilever who wants to look at something like, well, how many direct-to-consumer orders did I do? That's nothing they've ever done before. They've always been like selling truckloads of stuff. So this is new for them. Okay, so what does it look like? I didn't do bad. You guys, I think, all get this pretty well. But for food, this is the way that most of those guys have done it. You saw the acquisition model. They're like, well, we don't know how to do that, so let's buy a company that does it. The problem is that really starts to harden any synergies that you would get across your product portfolio because you're forecasting and allocating way back here. And so the D2C guys, I think I'll sell this, package mine this way, I have my 3PLs, you have your 3PLs, you do pallet in, pallet out, I do kitting. But to really get some type of synergies, you got to bring this together into that technology footprint I showed you a minute ago. And this has been our approach. And I think that this is table stakes for a lot of sectors. And we're really excited to play with it for food because while it's table stakes for others, it is absolutely new here. So that was a lot of change happening in our sector. But at the end of the day, we're hyper-focused on these three areas. All of them, technology and systems, are radically having to change to pull together physically where we are, what the companies are selling, and our capabilities. That's kind of the story.